It's been a while since we've done this, Holly.
It has.
Do you even know what I'm mentioning?
Hollie-and-friends.
Hollie-and-friends. It's,
Yes.
you know, every once in a while, it just becomes this thing where Holly's like, oh, by the way, I know somebody and they'd be great to talk to. And it just so happens she goes, I know Mr. Windsor. And so I think that we should talk to him.
hmm
Mr. Windsor sounds very formal, but yeah,
Yes.
usually I go with the grand high exalted poopah, but Mr. Windsor is enough, So
Well, I always have a hard time calling my friends' parents by their first name because I just feel like there's this
Yeah.
element of respect. Like it's a Mr. Windsor.
that's a good thing. But Mike will do.
Okay.
I'm all about being down to earth and mingling with the peons and philistines. So
The commoners.
Thank you for
yes,
blessing us today. We appreciate you. So I think before we get into who you are, Mike, Holly, how do you know Mike?
Yes, it's a great story because I had turned, I think it was 21, and all my friends were getting married. And I was like, I don't have any single friends. I need friends. Dear God, please send me a friend. And I really could use somebody who could relate to me. And I just need a good girlfriend. And so I'm
Mm.
sitting there at church. I'm in a pew, and a girl comes and sits next to me. And we were doing a play together with our youth, our young adult, actually. And it was Carly. And that was, I don't want to date myself, but
It's 20 years
yeah, it's a couple years
ish.
ago
Ish.
ish.
ish. And then her and I became good friends. And so when I was visiting her in Newfoundland just a couple weeks ago, um, I got to chat with her dad, Mike. But
Well,
obviously I met Mike before that. It was just
yeah.
through Carly. And I was
Sherwood,
like,
It was
yeah, Sherwood Park and those
yeah,
places. Yeah,
yeah, just outside of Edmonton. And so I got to like inherit extra parents, which was wonderful.
I'm a
Yeah,
fan. I
yeah.
haven't changed the will.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah, so
well,
too bad.
see you guys.
Well,
Yeah, I still
um,
have people out there, babe.
I mean, not to give anything away, but your daughter is probably one of my favorite people ever.
Oh, thank
We
you.
did a garage sale before she left, and it was me and Holly and her, and I think it was maybe one of the funnest 2 days we've ever had.
Yes, it was so fun. So I miss
All
being
the
closer to Carly.
all the good comes from her mother. All the badness comes from her mother's side of the family. No, from me.
Well, Mike, we like to ask this skill testing question because we never know where it's going to go, and that is, who are you and where did you come from?
Well, I was born in the wagon of a traveling show. My mama would dance for the money day throw. Grandpa would preach a little gospel. I was born in Newfoundland in a place called Wesleyville and Bonavista Bay North, and it's 60 odd years ago. The odd being the operative word when it comes to me. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time there. I just
Hmm.
spent 3.5 years where before my father did make a decision to move elsewhere. I don't know if you want to go on right now because this is the beginning of it, if you wish.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Yeah. Well, in 1959, my father's biological mother and half sister were in the Mojave in Lancaster, just north of LA. And Dad, they promised him a whole future out there.
Hmm.
And they were very optimistic, and we were very optimistic for my father. My dad was in a wheelchair, basically paralyzed from the neck down from polio in 1949. And we drove to Gander and got on the plane and flew to New York and then flew to LA, where my grandmother and her third husband picked us up. And we went to live in a little back street in Lancaster. And then Dad saw an ad for a job, no pay,
A job no
and
pay? That
a
Was,
job
sounds
with no
sounds like
pay.
Christian
perfect.
radio.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was basically everything was paid for. but there was
Hmm.
no cash involved. And
Okay.
he had a university trained degree, and he could do bookkeeping. He had done it before because we had some businesses and that. And it was for a lady by the name of Pancho Barnes.
Okay.
Pancho Barnes was a stunt pilot uh, in early Hollywood. She flew in some of Howard Hughes's films.
Hmm.
She raced against Amelia Earhart
Oh, wow.
and won and lost. And about this time, people look at me when I'm doing this type of presentation to say, "You are the biggest liar I have ever met." They
Oh,
even
yeah.
take their glasses off. Like, hop in with a question, or did you have something there, Holly? Or
No, I was like, are you lying? Because it does sound like
no,
you're
it's
making it
true.
up.
It's
Okay.
true. And he got the job, and there's 3 books about her,
Hmm.
uh, 2 movies, one, a Hollywood type of a deal. The other one's documentary. And as Valerie Bertinelli, I think, is that I think that was the star that played Poncho
Oh,
in
okay.
the Hollywood movie. And I haven't yet to see it. I only saw glimpses and I couldn't find the full thing, but she's portrayed in there's what's the movie where they train the astronauts? And anyway, she's in one of those movies. The actor is in it,
Oh,
someone playing
okay.
the part,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
But
Okay. Wow. So what was it like
very
growing up in LA then?
well. I wasn't there long. It was, it was. I have some vague memories of it, but my most of my memories came from my mom and dad and my sister.
Hmm.
So it was the typical cowboy, and ride down now to the fence and we'll fix this up down there. And my mom would take the car and take my sister down to the road. And it was
Hmm.
a long ride across the ranch and get out. And my sister would get out through the fence and get on the school bus. And one time mom was going to get back in and all she could hear was rattle, rattle, rattle. And
Hmm.
this was the rattlesnake, the sidewinder. And
Oh,
my mom hopped in the car, drove back to the ranch and to the farmhouse, and one of the cowboys went down and shut the gate. So there was a train used to go through the ranch, and as a 3, 4 year old, I would go out and put a penny on the track,
Yep.
and engineer would wave and toot the horn, and I was like, I was in heaven, you know,
yes.
as a kid like that. And there was she had a plane there that I don't think she ever flew, but boats, just a whole pile of toys. And remembering one of the boats she had, I kept some turtles. And one day my sister heard me having fun and playing outside, and she went out to check on me. Probably my mother or father said, check on Mike, because my sister was a little bit older than me. She was more mature.
Yeah.
And she ran out, and I was had a little stick and I was playing with a scorpion.
Oh,
Oh, jeez.
perfect.
So she took the shovel and dealt with the problem. I still have the lump. No, no, no. Yeah, she hit the scorpion. That's the difference. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
She
There we go.
always, yeah, she always credits saving my life, and
Mm,
I would add for humanity.
there
Like,
you go. Of course, of course.
So if you're in California, when did you then go back to Newfoundland?
very interesting thing, and I do have a book almost finished.
Okay.
I've been saying that for 3 years. I do have a 5-minute documentary that's up about my father,
Hmm.
and it's been seen by somebody here. They're from Ontario, actually, and they do production. So they wanted to chat with me when they get back from Europe about maybe looking at doing a movie or doing a
Nice.
screenplay, a biopic, something like that. So that's a long shot, but it's certainly a good message.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the why me part is all about.
Hmm.
Because I go back before my dad, And my grandfather, biological grandfather, uh, was a sailor in the First World War. And Johnny, he was on Q ships, or mystery ships, they were called. Q from Queensland, which is a town that's been renamed in Ireland now. But anyway, they would set themselves up as bait for the enemy submarines.
Oh, wow.
And they were
That's
tramp steamers. They looked like junk, but behind the tarps and everything, and they had guns.
hmm.
So the sub would surface or maybe fire the torpedo on just below. And this is easy pickings. We're going to sink this ship.
Yeah.
And when they would surface, bam, 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 the tarps would go down. And one of the ships he served on, although he wasn't on it, was the first ship that used a depth charge to sink a submarine. And my
Hmm.
grandfather joined the ship a few months after. But he was sunk twice, torpedoed and sunk twice. And they, Chess Miles was his name, and they gave him a break. They sent him back to that foreign country called Canada, because at time Newfoundland was a country. And he went to Halifax, and it was great. He was on the Niobe, and he got there, and 8 days later, two ships decided to run into each other and almost wipe out Halifax.
Hmm.
The Halifax explosion. He was blown off the ship. He still survived.
Hmm.
He had iron in his head and shrapnel and that thing. He brought him back to Newfoundland. He survived. He met my grandmother. They got married. They fell in love, got married. And he went, two of them had friends and family in Brooklyn. And he went to Brooklyn to work in the shipyard because he was an engineer, a ship's engineer.
Yeah.
And at that time, not 100% sure, but the shrapnel probably moved, and he had a brain bleed, and they got him to the hospital, but he died. And my father wasn't born. He wasn't born until 4 months later. But that's a very key part in the why me part, because like, why did that happen with my grandfather? And when I talk about him, I've never met him. I got pictures of him, but it just moves me because I love the man and I love what he did. And, and my father was born there, and my grandmother found it hard to take care of a single mom. So she brought him back to her family, her aunt and uncle in Newfoundland to raise.
Hmm. Hmm.
All very important things to know about the why me, because you got the line going through of that chance of why did this happen. So she brought him back to Newfoundland. The aunt and uncle that raised him, he died at 6. He died when dad was 6, so dad had no father, was sort of uh, orphaned twice,
Yeah.
and was raised by a very stern great aunt. But dad was very smart. He finished the schooling he had when he was 15. They wouldn't let him into university. He was too young. He went back the next year. And when he went back, he got at 16 years old. If you had a picture of yourself on American soil, you retained your citizenship.
Hmm.
So at 16, in one of the Navy bases here, dad got his picture taken and maintained his American citizenship. All very important to the why me story. So he went out teaching. He got married. My mom and dad had my sister, Rosalie, and they uh, they were just heading out into life. My sister was 2.5, and dad was a teaching job. He was going to become a principal, but because his foster mother aunt wanted him to move back home, he went back home and took a job in 1949 registering the new senior citizens, the Newfoundlanders that were senior, to the new Canadian pension.
Hmm.
Because, and they would say, "What? I'm going to get all that money, my son? You're crazy," and all that type of stuff. And dad would go from house to house and show them the paperwork and convince them and sign them up. And he was in a place called Glovertown, which is about 3 hours outside of St. John's and an hour or so from Westerville.
Hmm.
And he caught the flu, or he thought it was. And maybe it was a fever or something, but he wasn't feeling well. And the next day, a splitting headache, a pain in his neck, starting to lose the strength in his legs. They got him up to the train station, which took him to the the ships, the boat that would do the coastal thing. They brought him back to Westerville. By the time they got to Westerville, he could not stand.
Wow, the short time.
Two men had to help him up the path. My mom saw him coming up through the kitchen window and said, "Oh my goodness," she said, "they got Bobby drunk." And my father hardly ever drank, right? Probably about the beer a month, right? Number one was because of the money and that part. But they got him in there, and the doctor came down. You remember this? I think it's fictional. I'm not sure, but when doctors used to visit people's houses, I
Yeah,
think they
house
made
calls.
that up to make us feel better. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they went and visited dad and checked it out and had to do some studying and said, Marion, my mom's name, Bobby has polio.
Ooh.
His whole body was shutting down. All the muscles weren't working. His diaphragm, his nails were turning blue because he wasn't getting the right oxygen. And she said, "Well, what are we going to do?" Well, the only way to get him is get him in an iron lung and save his life.
Yeah.
And that way he would have to take a boat and a slow train and all of this. It would be days actually before he got to St. John's, the
He'd never
hospital.
make it.
Never made, he wouldn't have made it, Johnny.
Yeah.
And one of the men in the hospital said, Bobby is an American citizen. So they telegraphed Argentia, which is a naval base during the Cold War, just outside of St. John's. And they had this magnificent boat plane called the PBY. And they would be able to land in the water. They would look for submarines. They would do a whole gamut of stuff. But rescue was one of them. So they flew out and they told him, we have an American citizen here dying, and if he doesn't get to St. John's, he's going to pass. He's going to pass on.
Yeah.
So they flew out, with two pilots, a nurse, and a doctor. They got my father and mother, and Dad remembers when they took him down the steps to take him to the boat. They had to put a cloth over his mouth because any wind was taking the air right out of his lungs.
Mm-hmm.
It was just causing that vacuum, and it was coming out, and he was fighting for every breath. And and they rowed out, or they got I think they would call it a punt, with a
The pontoons or whatever.
like that, right? And they get them in the side of the ship. They passed them in the side of the PBY, and the doctor and the co-pilot took him, and they had a bunk there for him. And they got him hooked up, and I guess maybe oxygen, I'm not sure, but the sea was kind of rough because it was kind of rough getting out there. And they had a rocket booster in those planes that when they were trying to rise above the lop in the ocean and couldn't get enough speed, they kick in this rocket. And of course, when it kicked in, there was a couple of, one old woman especially, oh my goodness, Bobby this is killing Bobby, and now the plane is on fire and is exploding. But these are stories that were told me, right, by my father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they got him to St. John's, got him in the iron lung, and he spent almost 4 years in the iron lung. Why me?
Wow. Yeah.
Why me? At the prime of his life, 26 years old, starting on a career, has a young child, loved his daughter, loved his family. He was well respected in the community, a Renaissance man, and anyone had a letter to be written, you go see Bobby and that type of stuff. And this was all yanked out from underneath him.
Yeah.
Mm.
In like
So
a moment. But yet you're here today. So he didn't pass away.
No, he lived for 33 years. He passed
Wow.
away. He always used to say anything above 25 years of bonus years. Thank the Lord for that. He would always say, I'm in a prison, and when I die, I don't want any sadness or sorrow. I want a
Yeah.
celebration because
Mm,
I've been set free from the prison of a paralyzed body.
yeah.
Mhm.
Always positive. Oh, and this is very contagious. I can probably, I don't know if I can count how many people I would say about my father. How many times would people go into his presence and go away better?
Yeah.
You know, he became a rehab counselor. What better than someone paralyzed to tell somebody else, oh, I understand what you're going through? Well,
Hmm.
he did. For me to counsel people like that, to say I understand what you're going through would be hypocritical. I don't. He did. So, you know, there's a lot more to fill in there. I know you cut away 20 minutes or a half an hour. I think we got a full week to go yet before I get to it, but
Well, let me ask you this question then.
yeah, tell me.
If we fast forward just a little bit though, so your dad had polio, your dad's paralyzed.
Yeah.
You're born, so you're obviously a miracle baby in itself. Growing up, did you feel, was there any that you had to be the man of any kind because your dad was bound to a wheelchair, or like dad was always dad and you got to live a life just being a boy?
Good question. No, let's move on with my story. No, I'm just that, you know something, Johnny, that is something I actually haven't thought about.
Hmm.
It's a very good question. What would strike me was this. Number one, I was, you know, a lot of people call it a miracle child, and I'll let people look into the biology of the difference between a spinal injury and polio
Sure.
and reproduction. I'll let
Yeah.
them do the bio on that, the
Okay.
Do
biology.
the homework. Okay.
Yeah. So I was fortunate, but you know, and I'm here today because of the love mom and dad for each other. I could get into unbelievable stories about how mom took care of my father and how my father took care of the family.
Yeah.
You know, one was the brain and the other one was the brawn. But going back to your question, what I always felt is I didn't have a dad that could do the physical stuff.
Hmm.
You know, it's like teaching me how to be a carpenter or sail a boat. All these things he loved to do. I didn't have anyone teaching me how to hunt, but I did have someone that was there 24/7 for me. And I can remember sitting, and he had a board on his wheelchair, and I would sit there, and he would tell me how to tell time.
Hmm.
He would give me history lessons. He would recite poetry. He would tell me about the last of the Mohegans and James Fenimore Cooper and all of these stories, and about 2 years before the Mass and Horatio Hornblower. All of these things were embedded in me because he had time to share with me his classical education from 20, 30 years before. They
Hmm.
had to learn that much poetry by heart, and I know a fraction of what he taught me. But it was just having that time. I dwell on that. Uh, did I ever feel like I had to be the man of the family? When I got big enough, I had to do the physical part
Hmm.
to help get dad out of the wheelchair and into the bed, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Uh, Mom would dress him and stuff like that, but would call me and say, Mike, come on in now. Your father's ready to get up. And I stand down by his feet and pull him down. And he would slide in the wheelchair, and we would lift him up and hook the back together. So, yeah, that part of it was there. But I always remember, and I remember, you know, like specifically climbing up on the board and him teaching me how to tell time.
Hmm.
And at 16 years old, I should have known how to tell time, but
Did you break the board?
I didn't break the bone. I get no respect around here. I get no respect. So, but it was just a totally different upbringing. There's so much I could tell, and I'm leaving a ton of it out, but he did get a job with the Newfoundland government with the Department of Health and Rehab. He met a lot of people. I grew up around people with disabilities. I grew up around people that could have whined and complained and given up, and a couple of them did, but most of them didn't. Most of them persevered. Most of them put it through. You just did what you had.
Hmm.
And my father took one check in his life, and I think that was in the United States, to get the family, get gas to drive back to Newfoundland, because things didn't work out there. Living with no paycheck was not an easy thing. My sister would collect, soda bottles on the side of the highway to get her uniform dry cleaned.
Mm.
And we were poor. We were poor, poor, poor. And my father would paint pictures. I don't think I got any here, but he would paint pictures with the brush in his teeth. And say, I can still remember mixing with toothpicks, little wooden, mixing the paint for Dad. A little more yellow now, a little more, and he would paint with the brush in his teeth like that, and go downtown in front of Woolworth
Hmm.
with the paintings down by his feet to try to sell them.
Mm.
And I think at times my sister would be embarrassed by the fact that we were that, and about the time the song came out, secondhand shoes, secondhand clothes, they all call me secondhand Rose. My sister had to deal with that. I was too young. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it. I grew up in a storybook, living on a ranch, with horses,
Yeah. Yeah.
that. So we got back here, and Dad was fortunate enough to win an award for his tenacity. Started a newspaper, at a restaurant. He had a restaurant and had a small store, and someone recognized it, gave him an award, and our life. We moved in back to St. John's here, and I grew up. I grew up downtown, right downtown with all the people from St. John's with the Irish accent, right? So
Hmm.
that's where I grew up. But it was a great education. And
Yeah.
I look back, and is there anything I would have traded? Is there anything I would say, why me?
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, there's a few why me's, but I was privileged. I grew up in love.
Yeah.
I grew up in love. And when I did anything stupid, my father couldn't punish me. Well, if he tried to run over my toes or something, I disconnect his battery and he wouldn't be able to move, right? So,
Oh.
so I grew up in that privileged environment, being surrounded by love. So why me?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And my I don't know how we doing for time now. Gosh,
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
go
Because I've
ahead,
got some
Adair.
questions for you, just about,
Okay, go ahead. You go first.
okay, because your dad was clearly a pillar in the community. His
Mm,
quote unquote disability didn't stop him at all. Like he
right.
accomplished more, I think, with your mom and in their situation than what a lot of people accomplish who would not be needing a wheelchair or those kinds of devices. And that's a phenomenal legacy to lead. What did you take away from just reflecting on their lives and how they just had so much tenacity?
Holly, I go when I tell this story, which is my wife will tell you, it's daily, you know. When I tell this story, something new pops up.
Mm,
And I remember having to teach a class about resilience and about love, like, and it came to my mind. My mom would pull over to rest stops going through the foothills of the Rockies on the way back, pull into a rest stop, and my father would have to use the washroom. And get a man out and get him in the water, it's not feasible. So we had a car, the seats recline quickly. She would recline him. She'd go back. There was a bag. She'd get the bedpan, and my sister would be taking care of me, and my mom would cover Dad's middle section with a towel, undo his belt, roll him over, pull his pants down, roll him back on bedpan and leave him be for whatever time. And then he would say, Mrs., come on back now, I'm done. And she'd come back and reverse everything, you know, with cleaning them up and things like that, and then buckling them up and getting them sitting up straight. And commitment, you know, something goes wrong in a relationship. Well, we say, goodbye,
Hmm.
goodbye, see ya. I never saw that. Although at times when Dad was first sick and in the hospital, she was told by well-meaning Christians, you should leave him there, get a divorce, and find another man and start a life.
Wow.
I wouldn't have been here, you know? Not that that's the big deal about it, but she was committed to him her whole life until he passed.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just phenomenal to see. And now my wife has some physical challenges, and Holly, you're aware of some of them. They're not
Yeah.
anything bad, but it's commitment to each other. You know, she's had to deal with me and all my problems. So it's a verse. I know it's a verse found in Philemon, the 6. It says that the sharing of your faith may become effective by the acknowledgement of every good thing which is in you in Jesus Christ. So I can sit here and dwell on the negative things. I never had a dad to do anything, take me hunting. I never had this, never had that. My wife is sick and now I'm getting arthritis and blah, 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 blah. However, we need to focus on the positive things in Jesus Christ. And we need to think about everything that we have been blessed by, and we need to make sure that we're a blessing. Whether I'm going through a checkout, like I did last night, and say to, are you finished still in school? I'm in grade 11. You know, oh, what are you thinking about taking? I'm thinking about becoming a lawyer. Oh, well, that's a great thing to be doing, you know. And the career counseling comes in, or wherever. Usually it might even just be a laugh. I might be, you know, when they're playing with a credit card or something like that, and something comes up, and I'll say, oh, the person behind you will pay 50%, you know. So it's just a laugh, you know, and they know it. They're quick to catch on to that, but at least you leave them with a smile. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a longer conversation, and with men in a mind or women in a mind, and say, look, I got no use for the church. I'm not religious. And I said, good, neither am I. I'm not religious. Well, what do you mean? You're a pastor. You were a pastor. I said, yeah, but I'm not religious. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, religion is mankind reaching to God. Christianity, I'm a Christian, is God reaching to mankind. That's the big difference. And men and mostly men have tried to put a pile of rules and things together for people to follow, and we cannot do it. You can go back through time. We cannot do it. But what we can do is let Christ come in and live the life in us and through us that he wants to live. And we'll fall flat on our faces many times. And I would tell people, look, there's nothing you can do to make God love you less, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you more. That's the bottom line. He loves you and wants to get to know you better, and you to know him better. So
Yeah.
I won't take up collection right now, but if you do have some spare change,
Please pass the offering around.
but I'll throw it up in the air, and whatever comes stays up is God's, whatever comes down is mine, right?
Yeah,
That'll
there you go. There you go. Well, I mean, your family obviously played such a huge instrumental role in your life. You've been a pastor, counselor, you do a lot of different things. And so, just for you and thinking about your own life, I'm curious just about that moment where the faith that you have now became your own faith. And when did you decide, like, this is going to be what I'm committing my life to?
yeah. Another great question. I sound like a politician, not the Speaker of the House, by the way. Uh, Keep
Ugh.
that out, Johnny, okay?
Oh, keeping that one in.
uh, I remember growing up in a church, and I could tell you stories about the two orderlies my father met in the hospital. And when he heard he was in St. John's, they came down and pushed Dad about 2 kilometers and brought him to an evangelical church so he could meet with God on a personal basis. Anyway, I grew up in a church where fear was a big thing. You go to bed at night, you go to sleep. Well, did I say my prayers? So maybe the Lord comes tonight. I won't be ready, and all of this type of stuff. Right? Grace didn't enter into it a little bit, not even a little bit. And then when I was a teenager, I heard this sermon from another source, and it was the grace of God and the love of God, and how much God loved me. And it was not, you couldn't measure it. All, if all the ocean were ink and all, to write it in the sky, it couldn't be done how much he loves me and Holly and Johnny and the hundreds of millions of people that are watching us at home, you know.
Hundreds of millions.
So all of those things, it struck a chord, and I don't have to be fearful of God. I have to have that faith, and I have to try to be like him as much as I can, but I don't need to be fearful. I don't need to go to bed at night and wonder if the Lord is coming, if I'm going to be here, raptured or not. I just love God,
Hmm.
and he loves me, and that's the bottom line. And so I was a young teenager, and I've been perfect ever since.
Ah.
Yeah, this nose red is from falling down and making a fool of myself and saying the wrong things. But you know something? I don't feel condemnation.
Hmm.
I feel I shouldn't have done it. I feel shamed at times, and back up and apologize and mean it. But I know where I am in Christ, and I know what we can do. And you might think this podcast, and I made a joke about hundreds of millions, but if one person is touched today by this, my silliness, but my testimony, and by why me, then it's worth it.
Hmm.
And it's worth it. Whether I do a major picture, like 90 minutes long, or whether I do another 5 minute doc, or whether I get to speak somewhere else, and I will tell you, there are people that come up to me and my wife and say, remember the time when you prayed, or remember the time when you did such and such. And sometimes you say, yeah, vaguely, but that made all the difference. I remember in church one time, just someone putting their hand on my shoulder
Hmm.
made all the difference. It's just a one little thing. And that's the why me. You are here for a reason. All that string of coincidences. And I could have brought in the number of egg and sperm and mathematically and all of that stuff, which is all cool. But all those, we would label them coincidences, about my grandfather being an American, my dad being born American, all those things fell in place. And it was just perfect. It was just perfect for me. And I don't know when we're ending, but I will tell you that when I was older teenager, a young man, I did not like myself. Okay, I actually would use the term hate
Hmm.
because of my appearance. I'm not a small guy, you know, and and no one will ever love me, but someone did. Jesus first, but my wife, she took me as I am. She's been working 45 years trying to, no, it's not working. But she loved me, and I just can't get over that someone would love me.
Hmm.
I have to see myself through her eyes, and she has, and see hers, back and forth. But God has this, image of us. And it's just fabulous. And, I just met Johnny, and I just feel that, the plan that God has for his life, and you're Holly, you guys are doing a fabulous thing, an unbelievable great thing. And there's, for me to say, oh, there's more in store for you. Well, there may be, but something, what you're doing now is very, very effective, very effective, and get the message out there. How did my picture show up? Where did my picture go? Or you do because people are asking me, when is this going to be on the air? When can I see it? All that type of stuff. And when can I touch the hem of your garment and be healed, Mike?
I don't want to know which woman is trying to run to touch the garment of your clothes. You have an incredible 5-minute documentary that will hopefully be a full-length film at some point.
Yeah.
So excited to hear about your father. Excited to hear about you. Your book, almost finished, 3 years now in the making. Hopefully, we'll be able to hear the full finished product in the future. But Mr. Windsor, the Grand Poobah, my friend, thank you so very much for taking some time.
Oh, you guys were awesome. Thanks for this opportunity.
Well, if you enjoyed what you heard today, like, subscribe, and check out more of our YouTube videos.
Don't forget to follow us on all the socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and facestrongtoday.com.